What's up? It's Ben Decker. I'm here on the Modern Spirituality Show with my friend Alexandra Roxo. You may have seen her on Netflix's Too Hot to Handle. Maybe you've read her book, Fuck Like a Goddess. She's an amazing author, an amazing poet, writer for years. She was an artist. One of the many ways she expressed her creativity was through the creation of the show, Be Here Now-ish, which you will love if you haven't already experienced it. And she's also the host of the Holy Fuck podcast. And I'm super stoked to be here with this amazing woman. She helps women and men and couples access the common thread between spirituality, sensuality, sexuality, and living a really fulfilled life. So I can't wait to introduce you. Thank you for being here. Welcome, Alexandra Roxo.
Thank you. You did a great job introducing me, Ben. I feel like I was like, you gave it all, I also love, long walks on the beach and dance parties.
Yes, and you live in a beautiful mountain home in Boulder, Colorado. You travel all over the world. You're multilingual.
Yep, half Brazilian.
Half Brazilian. You speak Portuguese and English.
Yeah, which is so fun.
Yeah, that's amazing. So yeah, there's so much to say. And the reason that's funny, guys, listening and watching, is because right before we press record, I was like, am I going to do okay on your intro? That's why.
I give you an A+. He did great. He got an A+. Yeah.
Yay, pat on the head. Good boy. He's a good boy. Well, I'm thrilled to be having this conversation with you because I've always really appreciated, since we first met, I've always appreciated your sincerity in person. I had some level of familiarity, I think, in the periphery because of how many mutual friends we have. So some level of awareness. I think I had heard of your book, and that you had released that book, and but I know also as an author that there's a difference between what we've released and what it's like to really be with us. There's resonance, but I have always been really grateful to have that experience since we met of what you bring to the present. So I'm happy to bring you in.
Thank you. I love that feedback. And I get that a lot from people. It's just like, wow, you're really honest. You feel really genuine. And I'm not sure if it's because we met in LA. I lived in LA for 6 years. I lived in New York for 12 before that, off and on. And I'm not sure if it's because there's like an expectation that in LA people are putting on a show or kind of making it about themselves, or that there's a level of fakeness or for lack of better words, or performing. But I feel like because I had my most formative years in New York City, I moved there when I was 18, that there's like a frankness that you cultivate living in New York, a no bullshit. And when I moved to LA, I was just in that no bullshit. So if I met someone at a party and they were like, let's hang out, I would be like, great. And if they were flaky, I would call them on it. And I would be like, hey, you said you wanted to hang out. Is that still true for you?
Right.
Instead of just like sort of pretending that we never had those conversations. Right. And I definitely got my little tender heart hurt sometimes at first because I didn't realize.
Because you're actually really sincere and really tender also.
Yeah. So in those moments, I was like just being genuine and asking and trying to kind of weave and find my people when I landed in LA. And that was the harder part. It's like, I remember Brie Luna of the Hood Witch. I don't know if you follow her. She's amazing. She once posted something like, not responding is the California no, like just silence, not responding to a text.
Right.
And that really resonated with me because I was like, oh, if people like don't respond, that's a no, just.
I have to say, as a Libra, there's another side to the not responding.
Okay.
The Libra's always presenting both sides.
Yes,
I
please.
hear that. I also know that for me, I don't always respond. And it's really about me. It's really about like, I'm hiking right now and I intentionally left my phone at home, and I'm upstairs with Sa right now. And I left my phone downstairs on purpose, you know?
Yeah.
And so and then sometimes, this is so controversial. And for everyone who I know and love, like, I love you. Literally, don't take this personally. Sometimes I will read it and I won't know what to say. Like, we have to know that each and every one of us, we're always in different states and places of consciousness in that moment. If I'm sensing that I'm not fully in like the right place to respond, I literally need a second. You might get residue of something else, not necessarily in a bad way, but you know how they say, don't make promises when you're happy. Don't make criticisms when you're angry.
Oh, I haven't heard that, but I love that.
Yeah. So there is like something I learned, and I haven't always been this way. I'm a fucking talker. Okay. I will literally talk over you, you know, but.
Ooh, you a talker?
But Marianne
Always
Williamson,
like really amazing spiritual facts and really scholarly things.
yeah, it's totally, well, you go there with me. You're always here in like the geek zone with me. So, but something Marianne Williamson started to speak about a couple of years ago. I sort of remember when it like came into her life, because it sort of was when she started to teach about it. She said she reads biographies of accomplished people, and something that she studies them, and something that she's noticed is they don't respond right away. Mm-hmm. They take a beat, you know, and I have that tenderness, a similar kind of tenderness. I have like a tender heart. I'm over here. Scorpio, I have like a lot of Scorpio in my chart. I'm a Libra. Yeah. Scorpio gets a bad rap, but it's super sensitive too.
Super sensitive. Yeah. I'm Pisces. Yeah. And I also don't respond to people for weeks sometimes, but I always respond eventually. Okay. Not always. Sometimes I miss things.
Exactly. And it's not always a no. It's not always a no.
No. And no. When I miss things, sometimes I just miss them and then I feel really bad about it. But there are texts in my phone that I haven't responded to in maybe a few months. Like, so
not really ghosting. I don't believe in that as like truly.
No, but this is where I'll say, I think, I'm not sure if Sa did the research around this, but my friend Ruby, who you know, Warrington, was telling me about the capacity that Sa also has this incoming in his next book, the capacity, how many friends we can have at once, how many people we can get to know. And so, you know, we have like an inner circle, which I think is like 5 and then 15 and then 50 and then 150 or something like that. Don't quote me on this exact numbers, but so when my inner circle texts me, I always text back within 24 hours. Okay. Not always, but mostly. Or I'll text and say, message received, in a crazy day, love you, get back soon. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that I feel like I have the capacity to always do, is to just write something fast or do like a 3-second, like having a crazy day, but I'll get back soon, you know? But only am I going to do that to maybe my inner 5 or maybe my 15.
Right.
When we start going past 15, it's like, I can't. It's like, oh my God.
It's a literal capacity, a physiological capacity thing that you're talking about. And then there's also the reality of, you know, once you have an audience and a profession where there are students and colleagues that enter in, and yeah, I mean, I think that every person's different. So the numbers, like you said, don't quote anyone on it. The numbers are going to be different based on individuals, you know, but this comes up, what this brings up for me, especially something I think is interesting to talk with you about, is intimacy. Yeah. It's like what Sa and I call our relationship. We say that we are the Mahasangha. We have the Sangha, but he and I, it's the one-on-one that just we have. And then there's, you know, those concentric circles.
Yes.
Out from that place. And so what comes up for you around that, this notion of like the intimacy and the layers of relationship?
Well, there's a great book and also an audio series by Sounds True, actually, with Stan Tatkin. I think it sounds true. And it's called Your Brain on Love. His book there's one called Wired for Love, one's Your Brain on Love. And one's an audio series, one's a book. And he talks about in that how when we have a primary attachment person, like a person who their emotional state, their mental state, everything impacts us very deeply, that's the relationship we need to tend to first. So if that person is going through something, or if we're in a conflict, we need to repair that, because otherwise everything else trickling downward will be a mess in a way.
Yeah.
And I love the way he puts that. And it's like creating the stable foundation with the primary partner, so that then you can arrive to all these other people. Now, I don't think that that's available 24/7. We're all human. Sometimes we're in a fight and somebody has to do something and the fight doesn't get repaired. But I do think that having that Mahasangha, that you prioritize the union between two people. And so sometimes that may mean putting other things aside. I think in our culture today, there's a lot of me for me, like me first. I got to prioritize myself, my self-care. And a lot of that is beautiful. And there is a shadow side of that, which is, oh, well, I can't repair this rupture right now because I need to go take care of me. It's a fine line when we're dysregulated to discern that, wait, is that true that I need to leave this primary attachment bond to go take care of myself? Or as I repair the primary attachment bond, am I taking care of myself and my partner? And I'm not an attachment therapist. I'm an eternal student, and I'm constantly studying and learning and going to trainings and reading books. But that to me resonates in my heart spiritually, as if this primary attachment bond, like you said, this Mahasangha, if this sets the stage for the rest of my life, how could I just turn away from it if my partner is hurting, right? Even if how they're hurting is irrational, silly, messy.
Right.
Could I extend my devotional heart of love beyond my ego, which says they're being really ridiculous right now,
Right.
and commit to loving them, holding space for them, seeing them in their highest, even though they may be behaving in their lowest? Right. Not to use such, black and white languaging, but just to explain clearly. So to me, that feels important. And I do think when you've been on your individual path for a long time, and I think you and I are kind of, and Sat and my partner and a lot of people we know, it's like we've spent a lot of time healing and working on our careers, right? And being really devoted to our spiritual paths. So to then switch perspectives and to go, okay, now though, I'm going to invite this other person in, and this will be my spiritual practice. To not turn away from love, even in the moments where I really want to turn away from love. And to feel how I would prefer to just go off on my own and do me for me. And just like, that's how I know my independence, that's comfortable, etc. Then the leap becomes, what if I could not just run off to myself, right? But if I stay in the room. And so that's where I'm at in my journey. And I definitely see it rippling in friends around me. And it feels like a maturation and crossing a threshold together.
Oh yeah, definitely. I'm totally seeing that. I love the way that you articulated that, because the teachings, all these different spiritual teachings from different traditions always place an enormous emphasis on the value of sincere, compassionate union, bond between individuals and one another, and between the individual and the divine.
Yeah.
Something that I love about A Course in Miracles is this idea and this practice of seeing the divine in the other person that you're with. And of course, it's not from A Course in Miracles, but I love how they sort of normalized and modernized and sort of channeled through this technology of what a miracle is, which is to see love where there was fear, to see divinity where there was humanity.
Yeah. I love that too. And I think that's where we become mirrors for each other.
Right.
And we also reflect when and where we are not in love, where we're in fear, where we're in judgment, where we're have lost the heart, and that is an equal part of the journey of loving. And it's humbling because we get to see, wow, on my own, I can be loving and joyful all day. And it's amazing, me and God, and I'm praying and chanting and I feel high and bliss. And then you put another person in the room, and though I love them, they're like stomping around and then they're doing this thing and they're in a bad mood today or da 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 da, And then it's like, can I still be love, right? And can I still be love now? And to me, that's a lot harder, and that reveals to us all of our resistance. It's like, ooh, where am I resisting? And where do I just leave my heart because someone else is grumpy or someone else annoyed me? Like, do I fall off, the sort of throne of my heart because of one little trigger? Or can I stay in it and go, ooh, that's really hard. That really hurts. That's really tender, but I'm still going to stay in my compassionate heart. And it's a moment to moment practice. It's not, I don't think it's something we just nail and we're done with it.
Right. It's like a conditioning, a strengthening, and a conditioning that happens through experience and over time. I remember one of my first experiences with psilocybin. I was, I don't know, maybe like 19 or something like that. And we were at the beach and it was a full moon. And we ate a little bit of these mushrooms and we were, playing drums and singing and dancing around and howling at the moon. And as you do. And I remember walking back to our campsite, which was in the Leo Carrillo Malibu campsite. Right across the beach. So we were walking underneath the PCH straight to the beach from our campsite. And so we kind of all got separated. It's late. We're all making our way back at our own little pace. And it got very meditative that night. And I was walking back and it was so dark going through the woods back to our campsite in one moment that I couldn't see where I was. And it felt like a big stark contrast from being in the moonlight, where it felt like you didn't need anything, And all of a sudden I was alone in the darkness. And the psilocybin then gave me sort of that reflection of that fear experience, right, where the quote unquote bad trip comes in, the infamous bad trip, Yeah. And what I witnessed in that moment was, even though I was afraid, even though I had fear wash in, I was standing up in the darkness, out in the woods somewhere, and I pretty much knew the direction to keep walking in. And I just had to breathe through all that discomfort, and it unearthed primal childhood fears, childhood fear of the dark, of what goes bump in the night. All of those different kinds of things came viscerally forward. And I remember walking, even though I was so afraid. And I was like, this is what growing up looks like. It's moving forward in the dark, even though it's scared, even though it's scary, even though you're still scared, you're going to keep moving. Yeah. So like you're talking about that trigger, that pain in the moment. And just, even though this sucks right now, even though this is like totally pushing me over the edge, I'm going to sit right here.
Yeah. Did you make it to the campsite? Okay.
I did.
Wow.
By the time I made it to the campsite, I was like an enlightened master, as you know.
God.
The mistakes of the psychedelic movement is those moments where you think you're an enlightened master, And,
you're like, I just had a realization and now I am your teacher.
Yeah, exactly. That's like the primary, in a nutshell, problem. Like that's like the biggest shadow problem of those kinds of things. But for me in that moment, it just walked me through that one illumination
Yeah.
And it came up really strongly when you were describing
Yeah,
facing our fears.
exactly. And that's when you get to see who do I, not even how, who do I become
Mm.
in the face of my fears? Do I become an angry, mean person, a judgy person?
Mhm.
Or can I continue to be the truth of who I am in the face of my fears? And the fears could look like rejection, abandonment, not getting what you want,
Right.
um,
And I also think it's
shame.
important to say those fears that you're describing, sometimes they don't even look like that. Sometimes you have to like get
Oh
through
yeah,
the
that's the bottom
feeling.
level. That's like the core underneath everything.
Yeah, it's like to get even in there. Because actually, I'm pissed off at you for blah, 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 blah. For that
Right.
thing you said blah, blah, blah. But I specifically told you blah, 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 blah. And then you were like blah, 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 right when I told you to blah, 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 blah. So
Totally.
there's always that story, right? Where you,
Exactly. This is the stuff under the story. Exactly. Under the story, we got shame, we got guilt, we got denial, we got repression, we got rejection, but the story on top is, see, no one ever wants to play with me. No one ever chooses me. See, see the men always leave, right? Whatever that is.
right. Oh yeah. And you always do this. Here it
Exactly.
goes again.
You're in a story then. And,
Yeah.
that is part of the journey that's rough. And we joke about it. And, do you want to be right or do you want to be happy?
Neither.
Um,
Just
I know. I know.
both,
Do you
please.
want to be right or do you want to be present here in your body?
Right.
And it's funny how the wanting to be right for a lot of us who have that kind of shadow persona is probably because we're deeply trying to defend something inside of us that didn't ever have the space to really be defended. And so it's like now as adults or whatever, we get to say, no, I don't like it when you throw your clothes on the floor because it's right where I trip on them to get to the bathroom. And that's wrong. That just doesn't make sense, right? It's
Right.
like, of
This
course
is my
I'm right.
yeah.
It's like,
And the feng shui says no laundry in front of doorways.
exactly. And that's an absolute. And so I'm right and you're wrong. And you should
Yeah.
stop doing that right now.
Yeah. See this feng shui link? I'm correct.
I'm correct. Right. And I'm giving like a really silly example, but that's the sentiment behind it, right? It's like, it's usually, it definitely is about domestic things, but also it's usually about more tender things, or it can be problems that have a little bit more gravitas. But the end of the day, it is that same thing of like, if two people are trying to be right, they're going head to head.
Right.
They're literally going head to head, analytical mind to analytical mind. And so
it becomes a debate, competition.
exactly. And that's not the heart. That is not living from love. That is not living from the heart. And I do think that's appropriate in court. If you're a litigator, you're a lawyer, you're defending a trial, a case, but in the bedroom with your lover.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. You got to drop into the body.
And somebody's got to be the one that puts down the rightness first, someone's got to be the one, and I'm learning. I'm like,
I'm always like, can you please just do it? And so
yeah, can you do it? Can you please put it? Yeah.
you
I remember
please taking the higher road.
exactly.
I would really like for you to take the higher road for once.
Yes, it's your turn to take the higher road because I did last time.
I always take the higher road. I can't.
I remember once Moon saying to me, Moon to Simone, Sadie Simone's sister, who's one of our dearest friends and family. I remember her once saying to me, "You've got to learn not to bite each bait." That was not the word she used. That's not really her language, but she's like, "Don't fall into every fight. You choose which ones that you fall into."
Yeah, I love that.
And I didn't grow up with brothers and sisters at home, so I probably have less practice with that. But last night I was in the shower with my partner and I said something like, I made a statement and he was like, "No, that's not how it is. It's this." And I was like, "You know what?" I said out loud to him. I said, "You know what? I'm going to take what Moon said and I'm just going to start going, honey." And I was like, a part of my independent feminist woman, who was born in when I was 18 at NYU would be like, oh, hell no, I'm going to be right, and never want to be a woman who was like, oh yeah, honey, sure, whatever you say. But there are these moments where it's not about repressing one's truth, but it's about choosing. Like, if he says like, that laundromat is actually better. Like, do I really need to get into a debate with him about why the other one is better?
Choosing your
Choose your
battles,
battles.
prioritizing. It's like, maybe you're right. There was something I had to learn at the beginning and throughout of my relationship with Sa, is this idea that, okay, you do things completely differently than me, and you seem to have survived. So I'm going to let you have 1% of the control. I will relinquish between 1 and 1.5%.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's where our partners are really our spiritual teachers, because in those moments, and it's like when our grip gets so tight, that's just our grip on life, on everything. It's just a microcosm. It's like, if I'm wanting to control so much in this relationship, then that's probably me in general. That's probably my relationship with God, Goddess, divine, and life, that I'm not just trusting the flow of that to be met, to be filled by the energy of the divine. So, but it's definitely deep practice. And I can see why in generations past, people didn't have the tools or resources to actually practice. And so maybe they would go into repression or denial,
right,
or ignoring each other, or kind of aggressive fighting or yelling or blaming. And I think that what we're living is such a gorgeous evolution, because we're moving beyond that, and we're experiencing the relationship as our spiritual practice. Right. And that I just feel to be the next frontier. I think Richard Rudd of the Gene Keys also says something like that this is a new, it's not a new path, and like literally, but we're approaching it newly now as, oh, what if this was just another path to awakening?
right,
Relationship.
right. Yeah, I love that. The all of the major world religions have some sort of symbolism around our oneness with one another. In the Eastern traditions, it's often said literally, we are one. There's one life and infinite points of view. In the Judeo-Christian Islamic traditions, we hear about being family. In the Quran, it's said that you and I are just two fingers of one hand. We're all brothers and sisters. There's these symbols of we're family, we're children of God, we're brothers and sisters, we're reincarnations of each other, we live in parallel lives of people who have different races, different genders, different everything from us. We have parallel lifetimes with and as them. So there's this very definite interconnectedness that we can all agree on. So everyone's got a different metaphor or story or definition of what that interconnectedness really, really is. But I think it's safe to say that regardless of the details, the important part of that message is that we are connected. And so there's something extraordinary about that realization and the meditation and practice of that realization. You mentioned Sa's new book. Sa DeSimone has a new book on friendship coming out that we both were a part of the inner creation process with him on. And one of the beautiful things that he talked about in there, you mentioned earlier, were the circles of friendship capacity. But the thing that's coming up now is the three jewels of Buddhism. The Buddha, the enlightened self, the Dharma, or the way, the teachings, and the Sangha, the community.
I love that so much. And that's it. That's how we have a spiritual life. We have the teacher, the teachings, and the community together. And I say this to the communities that I lead, and I have one right now that we're on a 9-month journey together. And I'm like, you guys, we can't do this alone. We are relational. We learn in resonance with each other. We feel each other. We give each other permission. We enliven each other, which I grew up in Georgia going to the church, the Presbyterian church. And I mean, I deeply remember the line in the Bible, when two or more are gathered in my name, I'm there. And I firmly believe that across all traditions. I believe it in magic and ritual, that practicing on your own is incredible. Some people are so adept at that. And I do think that there are some of us who our magic is deeply unlocked, reflected, and amplified when we are together, praying, invoking, ritualing, and that's part of our humanity that in the Western world we have lost contact with on a whole. And so each time that we gather in ritual, prayer, invocation, healing ceremony, whatever you'd like to call it, we're restoring a link as Westerners to a spiritual life, and to a spiritual life that's not just about getting something, right? I'm not going to just pray so that I manifest my dream house, or I'm not going to pray so that I manifest my partner. I'm doing this to honor life and the goddess and the divine and the trees, oh my God, and the skies and the rains and the oceans. And this is so common in many, many indigenous cultures. The idea of the spiritual materialism and capitalism, it's like a spiritual capitalism. If I pray, I will get X. I'm not saying that you shouldn't do that ever, but that can't be the foundation of our spiritual connection or our spiritual life. That is the shadow part of the Western spirituality. So I love that we can restore a link to having a spiritual life, because we are spiritual beings incarnate in human bodies, and we don't know why we're here. And it's a mysterious, beautiful thing. And so we are in reverence to it every day. And so this idea of coming together with the Sangha is that it's like, it is such a deep restoration of something that is within each person, and that the Western world, I think, is deeply hungry for.
Absolutely. And it does have a parallel in what we consider the Western traditions. It's the teacher, the teachings, and the community. Like you said, it's the Christ, the gospel, and the church.
Yeah.
So Christianity has its own expression of it at its best case scenario. At the best case scenario, Christ is a wonderful teacher. At their best case scenario, each religious community at their best case scenario is coming together for something.
Yeah.
And then like you're referring to spiritual materialism. There's spiritual materialism expressing in wanting to manifest things, and also expressing in unconscious, insidious ways of asserting dominance over other people.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Dominance, elitism, excluding different groups, condemning other religions, condemning certain groups of people. And so even, I mean, I'm not saying that the West, what?
Self-centralizing.
Self-centered. Oh my God. Huge, 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 huge in the West. And I'm not saying that in the West on a whole, and let's even be more specific. Let's say the US. I'm not saying that in the US on a whole, we're like void of spiritual life or religion, because there's tons of it, but it's as a country, as a big culture that all lives on the same land, there's not a uniting one. And I think I heard Marianne Williamson say something like, on the flip side, the side of hate, they're very fast to unite and get on the same page and take action. But on our side of love, we all are tooting all these different horns and on all these different missions, and we can't, why can't we just rally together? And when I heard that, I'm like, oh my God, that is so true. On the side of hate, they're pretty damn organized, which is terrifying.
From like a theosophical perspective, the theosophists in like the 1840s said that the reason that the military forces, the capitalistic forces, the forces of greed and manipulation, the forces that would harm people in order to have a benefit to themselves, that would harm for a benefit in all the different ways. The reason those forces seem to have an upper hand is because in the physical world, it's their home court. They have the home court advantage. And then the higher qualities, the immaterial, spiritual qualities, the transcendental qualities are actually coming essentially from another dimension and making themselves manifest into this world. And we have to choose it. So there's there's an automatic lower nature that unfolds, but then the higher nature sort of has to be welcomed in. There's one tradition where they say, where the divine feminine says, she says, shower me with flower petals, fill my air with perfumes, wash my feet with your tears. You know, she says all these things, and it's all very poetic. But what she's really saying is, access that higher part of you by attuning yourself to the refined higher vibrations, subtleties, you know. And that's why in ritual and everything, of course, we bring in, I see your beautiful flowers you have there. I see that you have the books, you know, to have, and for me, I have like the artwork behind me. These are all different things that attune to like finer frequencies.
Yeah.
And it like is considered in training the lower nature. So the Theosophists literally believed that for a while, the animalistic lower nature would have control over the earth, and that there would be a transition point, a key singularity transition point. And they had an astrological prediction, of course, of the new age, the age of Aquarius, where the tide would shift, and the forces of light would become so adept in the material world that the scale would shift in that favor for an entire age, where we would enter into like the flooding forth of an entire age of unity and intimacy and peace.
Well, I don't know much about that, but thank you for sharing that. That feels like a perspective of almost like post-patriarchal. And I'm like, you know what I mean? Like kind of after shit's hit the fan. And I'm thinking, but what about these cultures, or even like matriarchy or indigenous cultures, where the highest vibrations were emanating from their embodiment, their rituals? I'm not saying across the board everywhere, but there is proof, without it even being a thing they were trying to do, right? Like,
there it is, yeah.
You know, and it's like, what happened where it's like, where the earth was honored, all bodies were honored. And I'm not saying that there was potentially like this heaven on earth Eden. I'm not saying that, but it does seem to be that there were cultures and tribes and peoples living in communion with the divine and the earth and their bodies and their blood and guts and sex and all of that. And, you know, I always come back to what happened. When did we abandon the earth? And when was it that all of those peoples, that something tried to take them out, you know, and something did bury a matriarchy or a matrilineal culture, and a lot of indigenous cultures. And it's like, if only there was someone to blame, you know, like it's like my mind though, it's always wondering, how did this happen? How do I live on land that once just used to be other people's land, and the heaviness of that karma,
Right.
and that no one has, it's like, it's almost like wanting a moment of timeout to go, whoa, time out. Wait, okay, we're on these other people's land. We should sit down and talk about this. Like, we should make this better, right? Like, we should repair this. Like, that was pretty fun. And to live in a culture and a country where we're not doing that as a whole, right? As a whole, is tough. And so that, from that perspective, I think, yeah, the theosophical thing, that's like, okay, yeah, now it's like a lot of yuckiness and shadow work collectively, like in order for the tables to turn.
Yeah, it's like the collective. Well, any individual, you work with individuals, you take them and facilitate them through major changes in their lives.
Yeah.
And so any major change on an individual level is super fun and easy and goes really quickly, right?
LOL. No, not at all.
Right, exactly.
It take years.
You take years of so much pain and so
Oh,
much
yeah,
tears and ups and downs and beautiful moments, but some gnarly purges too.
totally.
And so if that's what it takes for one person to heal through one person's traumas and dramas and heartbreaks, then we're talking about billions of people who have like ancestral, like no one's quite figured out. You're talking about some situations, and when you're talking about these like cultures that have been taken out, what I see and what I feel when you talk about them, and these different tribes and communities that have been so just genocidally removed from an equation, just completely bulldozed out of, out of their homes and out of their situations over the thousands of years that we even have access to. And who knows, like what the primal ways of our early being really were like,
Yeah.
And you look at all of that and it's like, even they were part of the collective process, even they all had whatever was hyper specific to that moment for them to achieve and create and expand through. And there is something really very interesting about feminine lineages, which I think you and I were recently talking about this on our hike.
Yeah.
The written language is not inherent to nature. It's something that humanity refined. There's things in nature, markings on trees and things like that, that deer or other animals definitely do. So we can see that it's not totally unnatural. But the way that we've developed and refined written language and the way we teach it in schools, for the longest time, women weren't even taught that way.
So true. Yeah. And it was like storytelling and singing and teaching in the kitchen and
and so this notion of oral traditions and direct transmissions and everything, the lineages live, they live in the intimacy of direct experience, like that wisdom's there.
Yeah. And it's just not quantifiable. You can't like put an exact title on it. You can't sell it. It's like that. And there's something really magical about that. And I think talking about the greater history of this planet is such a huge topic. And I am not an expert at all on that. And I'm just a person who is trying to understand it often, like kind of how we are where we are, since we are in pretty intense times. And it feels good to kind of always take it into perspective. To be
Definitely,
like, right, there's perspective. And on some absolute level, I do trust the flow of it and that we are in this process together. I'm not saying I like all the things that are happening, but that we are in a process, and that trusting God, Goddess Divine, is trusting that process even when we don't understand it.
Right.
Because we can't understand, I don't think, always the nature of suffering and why it exists. I remember being a little girl and going, why are these kids starving in these other countries? And why does this? And asking my mom, who created the universe? And who created the universe before that? And who created it? It's just like, these are questions that we'll just let be.
Yeah. I love that you asked those, because the unanswerable questions are the ones that unlock the infinite explorer side of you, and so you just like gave us a signal into like the depth of the seeking that you really came in with.
Yeah, I did. Yeah, I love that. Yeah.
Okay, so how's it going on Too Hot to Handle? You're like,
oh
Netflix show.
Well, I was only on season 2 and 3. And
Mhm.
I don't know if I could have been on the next one, but part of it going there during COVID was the first time I went and I had to kind of stay in the house for a month that I was in, not with the participants, but I wasn't even allowed to leave to take a walk for a
Mhm.
month. I was allowed to go down to the water and swim, which is gorgeous and like phenomenal and life-changing, but it's kind of intense not to leave the front door of a place for a month and to be able to walk around mental health wise.
Mhm.
I think I watched every 90s rom-com when I was locked in that house for a month. Recently, I was with two friends and we were on a writer's retreat. And we were like, okay, we're done writing. Let's look for a movie. We're going through all the 90s rom-coms. And I'm like, oh, I just watched Notting Hill. Just watched Runaway Bride. I'm like, wow, I watched them all when I was quarantined for Too Hot to Handle. And it was like quarantine in paradise because I'm in this 5-star villa, huge, soft king bed, like ocean view. But after 1 month of that, which was when we were doing season 2, I was tapped. I was like not having connection and with other humans and just being kind of locked away. I did, see a few people, and I had like a handler, like a babysitter who was in the house with me.
Mhm.
Um, but not seeing anyone like I knew or loved, and just being for a month. If I was on like a meditation retreat or something, maybe it'd be different, but I wasn't. I had work to do and I was doing different things. So I wasn't like, I'm doing this as a spiritual test. Can I stay in this house for 1 month?
Right. Right.
Um, so when I finished that, I was like, I can't do that again. That was a lot. Like I am a being who really values connection and I
Right.
need it for my mental health. And
Mhm.
so when I got back to the States, they were like, no, we want you to come back in the next season. And I was like, well, can I bring my partner?
Mhm.
Because that would feel really good mental health wise, and I was able to, and they like we worked it out so that he was able to come support, and we like created a workshop together. But I think after that, I was just like, Alexandra has a lot of needs, and I was not. I think they knew that if I came again, I wanted my partner to come with, and I didn't want to spend a full month away from him again,
Right.
which felt like such a big decision. The part of me is just like, but you could have kept like doing that. And when I was younger, I would always choose work,
Right.
or fame or fortune or exciting things. But I really am choosing my heart and how to be closest to my heart and to be close to love. And that was to prioritize love and connection and not put myself in a mental health deficit.
Right.
And some people have different constitutions, and for them being in a house alone for a month, mostly alone where you can't take a walk, maybe they would be more resilient than me. And at the end of the day, I did as much as possible. I did all these IG lives and I worked out and I I tried to keep myself really busy. But it's still isolating. And I think a lot of people experience that during COVID, not just me. In that moment, I was experiencing something that a lot of people were experiencing, which is what happens when you don't have a hug or touch for a long, long time.
Right.
My long, long time was not that long. But for me, it was like, oh my God, I need a hug.
Totally. It was huge, and I think that that's part of what is so crucial right now is like really, really learning who your people are, who you can have platonic intimacy with.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah,
I often think about people who are like, you were raised going to church in Georgia. I was raised going to the Mormon church, and in church it was like I get why my family stayed in
yeah.
that religion for so long. Community.
Community, people that
And
really have your back.
anytime we needed anything, my mom and dad, they had some tricky times financially raising 5 boys. They got married. My mom was 19 when my parents got married. She was 20 when she had her first of 5 kids, had them like all 1 year apart. She's 25 with 5 kids.
Oh my God.
The church, you better believe they helped.
Yeah.
Raised us. The church community raised the family, kept us safe, sane, healthy, visited my grandma when she was in the hospital, took care of the kids when my mom was getting surgery.
Yeah.
Community showed
Yeah.
up, you know.
Would you consider going to some sort of a kind of more free-spirited alternative church in LA to create that?
I actually years ago created something called Full Circle in
Oh,
Venice.
right. Yeah.
And, we had an amazing church building, and we had a membership like model or whatever, where it was like free, and then you could have benefits if you did one of the
Yeah.
sponsored things. And we had a meditation church service every Sunday that Michael Beckwith actually helped me kind of like create, and Marianne Williamson.
Oh,
So we had great like family as far as like people who were seasoned in the community, who were like elders,
yeah. I could so see you doing that again.
I
Like
mean,
not the same thing, but creating a beautiful space.
yeah, it was so healing, and it was huge and gorgeous and amazing. We brought so many people. Like, you would have been I would have loved to have you there. And
Yeah.
doing the saw method in there, like, forget
Oh
about it.
my gosh. I love that. I think hearing you talk about church, I'm like, I want to go, I want to be a part of a consistent spiritual community here in Boulder. I left LA to be with my partner here in Boulder. And I think that would be really powerful. When I was in high school, after we left the Presbyterian church, we went to the Unity Church, which is not the Unitarian Universalist, it's Unity. It's its own thing.
Unity Church.
Yeah, super new agey. Like I remember one time I was having a really hard time. I was 15 and my mom had my stepdad, and he had moved in with us, and it was very fast and it was very abrupt because it had been just the two of us, me and mom, for 10 years. And here this man is moving in, and I was like really having a meltdown about it. And I wouldn't even say his name. I would call him that man.
Wow.
Because it was just so foreign to me and scary, terrifying. And so one Sunday we're at the Unity Church, me, mom, and that man, my then stepfather. And there was an angel an angel interpreter, and she would draw your angel who would come to the Unity that Sunday. And she was at the front of the church, and she was like, what I do is I see who in the room needs their angel to be drawn and needs a message to be delivered. And out of the whole group, guess what?
You got the angel.
She called me up. I was mortified. I was like, are you kidding me? I felt so vulnerable and naked because I felt like I'm in so much pain inside. I'm feeling so abandoned. And I now have to go stand at the front of this group, which wasn't a huge church, 500 people. And she drew my angel, and she was like, your angel is really present and saying that what you're going through will pass and that you're really not alone. And I remember feeling just like, oh my God, so seen, but also so embarrassed because anyway, so that church was always really special to me. And I'm going to have to look up and see if they have one here in Boulder.
I love Unity churches.
Yeah.
Unity Church is a great one. Marianne Williamson was actually, she ran a Unity Church years ago in Detroit.
Wow.
Yeah, years ago. But yeah, Unity Church is a great one. The Center for Spiritual Living is a great one. Those are pretty similar to Unity. Agape has a whole like affiliate.
Agape is amazing.
Yeah. And then we live right near the Self-Realization Fellowship. Okay,
great.
And where I spent a few years actually in
you did
monastic training. Yeah. Huh. So I was
whole different life. You could have done you could have been so many different people.
Oh my gosh.
I love my introduction to meditation and yoga was via SRF because a friend of mine who I met at NYU when I was 18, she grew up in SRF. And so she introduced me when we were, just little babies. And so I have a deep, special place in my heart. And I love I still listen to some of the chants. There's one that's, it goes, engrossed is the bee of my mind on the blue lotus feet of my divine mother. And it's just like, engrossed is the bee of my mind on the blue lotus feet of my, and it's so beautiful. And it's like a trance. And it's just like, you're like divine mother. It's like the nuns singing.
Yeah.
I'll send you the link later.
I love that. And familiar, I don't know it off the top of my head, but I definitely want to hear that. I'll even put it in the show notes. If anyone
Well,
wants
I
it.
will, I'll tell people who are listening, for nearly 20 years, when I'm going through a hard time, I listen to sacred song, and it helps me so much. And the first thing when people tell me they're having a hard time, hard day, hard phase, I'm like, put on sacred music and listen to it all day and all night if you need
Agreed.
to, and let it be the thing that you hold on to. I've had ayahuasca ceremonies, breakups, moments where I'm in the deepest dark, and all I can do is focus on Krishna Das's voice coming through a speaker, and like, okay, that's my anchor to reality, which sounds a little dramatic, but when you're having a hard time, people, especially if there's plant medicines involved or breakups involved, and I discovered his music back when I was 19 through that same friend who was a yogi. But yeah, but it serves as such an anchor, an anchoring in of those divine vibrations.
Right. Yeah. And I think SRF was a great community for that. The one that stays in my mind, helped me listen to, like, attune to, like, the voice of the heart. And like drop into my heart center, because I still will go to there for a retreat once in a while, private retreat at the ashram there here in the Palisades. And the song is, listen to my soul song, listen to my heart song. And it's like such a good mantra for just like really, for me, it's like listening, not to the mind, not to the desire nature, but like really, like, what's my heart actually singing?
So beautiful.
Shout out to Yogananda, man. Shout out to Mahansa Yogananda.
Yes. Autobiography of a Yogi was definitely one of the books that changed my life that I read when I was 19. And Be Here Now, I read the same time, same summer, New York City, right before I did study abroad in Italy. It was a really funny time to have a spiritual awakening and go into a whole yogi phase, right when I'm about to move to Italy. And all the other kids at school are like, oh my God, we're going to Rome this weekend. We're drinking tons of wine. And I'm like, I'm sober, celibate, and a yogi now. Just like, what the hell? I just was like, but I got to Italy the first week of like study abroad. I got there. I met a woman. I walked into her apartment. She was Italian. And there was a Yogananda picture on her wall. And I had Autobiography of a Yogi in my bag. And it was one of those moments where I was like, I'm on my path. I'm exactly where I need to be. Then she introduced me to a meditation community there of all these yogis and monastics. And that was just an incredible part of my journey. So most kids go to Italy to like, have a big Italian moment. I discovered yoga and meditation, and I like meditated with these other yogi Italian monastics, like out in like little caves and things. Wow. Wearing communal clothes. Like we'd all pick clothes out of a bucket and wear sweaters that were communal.
Wow.
Of course, I fell in love with one of the monastics, and I was like,
just like fully hypnotized.
Yeah, he was like, why don't you come join us? And I was like, cause I want to like have a family. And I don't know if I said make love, but I was like, I want you to have love in my life. And he's like, we can both love God together. And I was like, okay, I'm gonna go now.
Not everyone is, in my family, in my tradition, we went on a 2-year mission. I didn't do it because I pretty much left the religion when I was 18 or so. But you go on the tradition is that when you're 18 or 19, you go on a 2-year mission for the church, and you live like a saint for 2 years.
Wow.
And you're fed by members of the community every one of your meals. You get up at the crack of dawn, you exercise and practice first thing in the morning, early, every single day. You wear specific clothes every single day. And you're never alone. You're always assigned some kind of companionship. for 2 full years. You know, it's kind of like the
Whoa.
opposite of what the Amish do.
Wow. Where they go party for 2 years or whatever, 1 year.
Yeah, this is like, you're not gonna party at all whatsoever. You can't even listen to music or watch TV.
Oh my goodness.
You know, it's all religious stuff for those 2 years. So the concept of me going on these like trips to monasteries and stuff like that was sort of like unintimidating because of the mission. And it was like 3 months somewhere. I could do that. It was like,
Yeah.
wow, I could do this for 4 months somewhere. That's, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
The 2 year thing, I never did.
Yeah.
So that concept was always there. So whenever I meet people like you who've actually also had similar experiences, you know, exploring in unexpected ways, especially young, reading Autobiography of a Yogi at age 18, going to a Unity church when you're a teenager, it's like, you're like from the future. You are a Gen Z.
I know. But my mom just, you know, it was part of her. She was playing Carolyn May's tapes in the car and teaching me about sacred contracts when I was a teenager, and Louise Hay and Led Zeppelin also. You know, it was not just New Age. She got me my first Lemurian seed crystal.
Nice.
And you know, she's not as new agey now, but still she has a meditating Jesus statue in her room right now. She sent me a picture of it, you know.
Nice.
So I can really thank her for bringing me into that at such a young age, because it just was, I learned about my karma, or that I had karma, what was karma, my aura, when I was like 12, you know.
Yeah.
And so we were always the kind of weird ones in Marietta, Georgia.
I'm definitely wanting to have an entire other conversation just about all this, where I feel like I could have like an entire podcast just more about what you just started to talk about. I feel like we could have so much fun talking about stories of us growing up, because it's like me too. I remember I was like 11 years old, practicing seeing my aura in the mirror.
Oh my God.
Like seeing other, and astral projecting. And like astral projecting, teaching people about, like,
do you think this is from our past lives, that we're just like, okay, we want to start waking up kind of young?
You know, the first introduction to the concept of past lives for me was that it was a symbolic way to teach us to love each other. So from an early age, when all those things were happening, I already didn't believe in literal reincarnation, you know? And so for the longest time, I was like, this is conditioned, because I was raised Mormon and we had all these rituals which unlocked something, but I knew that there was more. And I was like, so there's no way. I thought I was really smart about this idea of like reincarnation being a metaphor for something else. And then when I actually went to the Self-Realization Fellowship, the monk there was asking me about my relationship to meditation. And I had told him that I started really young, that my mother's name is Karma. Her given name at birth is Karma. So my Mormon mother, who's, you know, my dad, who marries my dad, who's a descendant of the founder of the Mormon church, my Mormon mother's named Karma. You know, it's like,
wow,
raised in that whole vortex. He was like, well, have you ever heard of reincarnation? And I was like, oh, yeah, of course. And he was like, you know, there's a lot there if you want to look at it. I was like, well, yeah, no, whatever, you know. And then later I actually got into past life regression hypnotherapy with Dolores Cannon. And so as a teenager, so I sort of,
gosh,
yeah, so many
all the lives.
We have so much fun stuff to like, but I think it's what I would say that makes like the most sense for me. If someone's listening and they are not like a reincarnation person, first of all, if you are a reincarnation person, I would say, yes, this is from past lives. And if you're not a reincarnation person, there's another narrative that also works for me, which is that there are souls who are prepared before birth, one way or another. If you believe in past lives, you're prepared before birth. If you don't believe in past lives, you were prepared in the pre-existence.
Yeah.
And you were born with everything on the inside and outside to fulfill something, to have some kind of opportunity to move through something in co-creation with your circumstances, in co-creation with the divine, you know, with your, there's like all this free will component. There's all these creative, artistic choices we get to make in the process, you know?
Wow.
So there is that part of me that feels like definitely one way or another, when I hear you say like you're learning about karma and auras and soul contracts as a teen, it's like your mother was such a divine hand selection, you know, and whether that's a reincarnation, you guys have karma together, or, you know, more of a one lifetime,
Right.
you know,
All the psychics have told us that we've known each other many lives. We've been sisters and this and that, you know.
I love to entertain all of it, you
Me
know.
too. And we'll know maybe when we die, maybe not. I
And
have a long
literally, we
list of
don't know.
questions. What?
If we literally never know, like we
I know
kind
it'll
of
be fine.
have like this like eternal open sort of sensual unknown, and allow it to be that way.
I love that, the sensual unknown. And I will be arriving to the afterlife with a list, being like, so was that person really cheating on me? Because I had an intuition that they were, but I just never really know. Also, are there really Pleiadians running the planetary? You know?
Yeah.
Like I'm keeping track here.
One of the things when I was growing up that they would tell us that we could do when we were, after we die, is that you could go to any moment in history anywhere and go experience it as it actually occurred.
What did you choose? Or what would you choose?
Well, anything.
No, wait, did you choose? I'm sorry.
What did I choose? I'm still alive. In the regular old incarnations, not like a special new one, this regular old. And I guess whatever that means. And but I always thought about the big historic events that have changed history, like the crucifixion,
right?
Like some of these moments that are taught as like a crucial fact. So at a young age, I was like, I want to witness the resurrection. I want to go and witness the crucifixion and resurrection of Christ. That was
right.
And you know that if
probably the cool thing to say too, if you're Mormon and you're like, well, duh, what else?
Totally, I'm like, what? It's like the right answer.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like the correct answer.
Yeah.
And me, the great student that I am.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, well, I'd love to keep talking with you.
I know.
I'm so grateful that you're here, and thank you so much.
This was great, and we could talk for hours, but this was perfect.
Yeah, this is a great introduction. I'd love to invite you back, and just like to whatever extent makes sense for you. And everyone, check out Alexandra Roxo. She's the author of Fuck Like a Goddess. And I remember the day
what?
I just was gonna say, I remember the day you gave me that book.
Oh, I love that.
And you handed it to me and you said, it's Fuck Like a Goddess, which basically means, and that's what you did. You put it in my hand and then you were like, which basically means fully embodying and living from the feminine nature, the divine feminine, connecting to it.
Yeah, I love that. And it's like, fuck like a goddess, heal yourself, reclaim your voice, stand in your power. And I define it and divine it as when you're fucking like a goddess or a god or a divine. And in the opening chapter, I say that, or like a cosmic firecracker, however you identify, that you're opening to life and you're like in a lovemaking with life. Mm-hmm. So you're being fucked by life, you're in a divine circular motion of you give outward your love and your tears and your art, and then you receive. And so it's a bit more of the poetic than, of course, we're going to think when we read fuck, oh, the like top layer is fuck like a goddess is like just have physical sex, but it's a bit more of a spiritually nuanced understanding of the word fuck.
That's what I love about your work. That's what I love about your approach, is that you're not afraid to use like the controversial languaging, but you are deactivating the negative charge and the violence of the F word,
right?
And you're actually using it to mean sexual union, connection, sensuality, intimacy. And so you're actually like deactivating its negative power.
Yes. And I talk about that in the first chapter too, where the word came from, what are some of the various meanings, and I go into that as well, so that it's not just kind of cavalier, random, just throwing that word around, but actually really carefully choosing it.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Well, super scandalous of you, super controversial.
That
of
was
you.
my 2018 self too. Since then I've changed and I've grown up quite a bit. My next book is not going to have an expletive in it. So
In
a
the
swear
title.
word, not in the title, but maybe in the book. We'll
Maybe
see.
in there,
I think we might be outgrowing some of that. I like, once in a while, but probably
right.
less than my younger self.
Yeah. 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 I love that. Okay. Well, I definitely want to have you on again.
Okay.
And
Love
hey,
you so much.
guys, check it out. Show notes for all of Alexandra's links. Check out her podcast, check out her book, follow her on Instagram. You have amazing content, and you
Thank
are
you.
so helpful. I'm like, should I be paying her just to be following her on Instagram? This
Oh, that's cute. I like that.
yeah, like, sure, here's my Venmo. But definitely give Alexandra a follow. And I would be so honored to bring you back and have you on again. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, my love. Well, thank you all so much for tuning in.
Yes, lots of love.